Great, awesome. Uh, Welcome everybody. Padmaja, could you turn your video on?
Hi.
Awesome. Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody is staying safe and well. Welcome to this edition of the Imagine webinar by IVCAP Ventures. We launched Imagine as a forum to discuss and engage with business leaders, investors, entrepreneurs, alumni across the globe to help us kind of discuss what's happening, be creative about generating opportunities, solving challenges. And over the past few months, we've interacted with a number of speakers that have included investors, thought leaders, CXOs, accommodations. And our topics have ranged from, how has consumer behavior changed in the post-COVID behavior, issues like cybersecurity, young entrepreneurs, how working women have been impacted, and a number of topics. And most recently, a growing topic of interest and debate has been around the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDG goals, and their role in investing. And given some of the growing questions and debate on this topic, we decided to hold a series of webinars to discuss and debate the various viewpoints. And today is the first in this series that we are presenting, Investing Through the SDG Lens. Before we introduce our esteemed panelists and our moderator, I just wanted to give a brief about IVCAP Ventures. IVCAP Ventures was founded in 2011 with a vision to leverage our global alumni ecosystems across the IITs and IIMs to foster entrepreneurship in India and to identify and invest in high potential entrepreneurs who are likely to be our market leaders. And then in 2015, we launched Ivy Camp, which is our first innovation and entrepreneurship engagement platform to work with, create value for, and help grow our early stage entrepreneurs. And we have now created a network of corporates, experts, incubators that we work with and regularly conduct engagements and innovation programs. Today, our panelists will talk on a number of topics around SDG goals, give a brief about the goals, talk about issues such as responsible investing versus impact investing, share their various viewpoints, and a lot more. So looking forward to a really good discussion. Just a couple of points on logistics. Our moderator will have a discussion with our panelists for about 35 to 40 minutes to allow enough time for the audience to raise questions through Q&A. I would request you to please submit your questions through the chat with your name, and then we will raise them with the panelists. So with that introduction, I'm thrilled to get started. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Smita Mishra, who's the founder of Pandoro, which is an organization that helps businesses be planet positive. Smita, over to you to introduce our panelists and get the discussion started. Thank you, everybody, and welcome again.
Thank you so much, Anju. Thank you for organizing this webinar and also for giving us all the support required to put this together. Hello, everyone. Myself, Smita Mishra. As Anju mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Pandoro Technologies. We are a platform that helps enterprises identify and manage their sustainability-related goals, risks, and opportunities using the SDG framework. We also support our clients with bespoke consulting services and remote sustainability teams in case they have limited or no teams to work dedicatedly on their sustainability roadmap. So welcome again to the webinar, and the theme of the talk today, as Anju again introduced earlier, is investing through the SDG lens. Now, SDG here actually stands for Sustainable Development Goals. And before we go further, let me give you really a short background on SDGs and sustainable development, and which will probably take us 2 more minutes, but I think it will be worth for you in case you don't have the context for it. So the modern concept of sustainable development is derived mostly from the 1987 Brundtland report, as per which sustainable development can be defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the future or without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. This was given to the world by the then chair of World Commission on Environment and Development, Ms. Gro Harlem Brundtland. So the journey on SDGs or Sustainable Development started in 2000 when 189 countries agreed on a vision for a new millennium. Now it was called MDGs or Millennium Development Goals, and we had 8 meaningful goals there. While we made good progress there on these 8 MDGs, we didn't really meet all of them, and the world was changing fast, and we were encountering more complex problems, and we needed newer set of goals, and which are more relevant to the new world, to the new problems. And so in September 2015, 119 countries came together and they signed to work towards and meet these 17 sustainable development goals by 2030. UNDP is the body which kind of helped them put together. The 17 goals have specific targets. In totality, we have around 169 targets. Now, the idea of SDG is to signify that the sustainable development means that growth must be accomplished with respect to both the nature and the humankind. So sustainability sits at the crossroads or intersection of economic goals, social responsibility, and environmental protection. Now, keeping that in mind and the theme of our webinar today, so the SDG actually impacts the capital market. The SDGs impact upon the capital markets in a number of ways. And but the most relevant for our purpose for today, with respect to the webinar, is that SDGs are a global consensus on a long-term sustainability goals, and the investors have a role to play in achieving these goals. SDGs can be used as a framework for measuring real-world impact at the investor and system level. And finally, they act as signposts for economic actors and public sector policy, which will impact finance both at the macro level, at the country level, GDP's growth level, and sustainability of the finance system, as well as at the micro level, that is the risks and opportunities for the companies and investments. So that is, with that background, let's get started on the discussion with our esteemed panelists today. So joining us on the panel today are Padmaja Ruparel from Indian Angel Network, and that I have to say a fan moment for me. Besides that, we have Subhadeep Sanyal from Omnivore, and we have Ashish Wadhwani from Ivy Cap Ventures. A very warm welcome, dear panelists, to all of you. And it will be great to hear from each of you a quick introduction and also a brief on your investment thesis of your respective teams. So we can start with you, Padmaja.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on this panel, and a special thank you to IVCAP, Ashish, and the entire team of IVCAP. And before I continue, I must say, I'm a fan of IVCAP, actually. So congratulations on what you've achieved and how you operate. So I think what we do is we've tried to create a large horizontal platform for seed and early stage investing. We are an angel group. We have an angel group with almost 500 plus investors, angel investors from 12 countries. So we've created a platform for angel investing, allowing investors to invest from almost any country and for investors to invest in any country. So we are geography agnostic as well as sector agnostic. That has really helped us to leverage more than just money. We've been able to bring mentors, we've been able to bring global networks, and it has enabled us to create some very valuable companies, both in terms of valuation and in terms of value creation for the ecosystem or the stakeholders. In fact, one of our companies, Dhruva, which we invested at $1 million valuation, totted up a $2 billion valuation. So we are sort of preening a little bit in reflected glory, and happy that some of the investors are still holding shares. We've also created a fund which is launched. It's a SEBI registered fund which invests after the angels. So it is largely a pre-series A fund. It's collaborative, it co-invests. It leverages a lot of the angel network that we've created in terms of mentors, in terms of connects, trying to bring and channelize all of that in the growth of the portfolio companies. We launched this fund because there are two perspectives which are very critical to early stage startups. The two resources are money and talent. I think money we were trying to bring through the angel group, and what we realized that many good companies were either skidding to a halt or slowing down because the next level monies were hard to get. And therefore, we sort of created this fund to help these companies accelerate and take it forward, getting them ready for next level VCs. So that's what we're trying to do. Uh, we've now created a portfolio of about 180 plus companies across 17 sectors. We're looking at a good IRR at the angel level at about mid 30s, and the fund is yet to start exiting. So it done some small exits, but I think those returns will start playing out also. So I engaged with the network, with the IAN from almost the very beginning. I'm a co-founder and sort of anchored the fund as well.
Thank you, Padmaja. Ashish, how about you? Like, if you could, of course, give your background and also talk a little bit about your investment thesis currently.
Sure. Thank you, Smita. And Padmaja, thank you very much for those kind words coming from you. It's indeed a great pleasure to get those compliments.
I meant them.
I know you did. Thank you. And you know, I basically am a managing partner at Ivy Cap Ventures. Ivy Cap Ventures, as Anju mentioned, is basically a venture capital fund which has been built around the platform of the global alumni of India's leading technology and business schools. Uh, and what that really means in practice is basically not only do we get a lot of referred deal flow from this community, this community is all over the world, so we really literally have access to talent and expertise from across the world. We tap mentoring talent from there. We sometimes companies come back to us and ask us for recruitment. That's a very important activity in a startup. So we go back to the same community for that purpose. We are able to support our portfolio in recruitment, in fundraising, in business connects through this particular community. And more importantly, we've also sort of using also giving back, as an asset management company back to this community. So it's a very symbiotic relationship, and I think, to be honest, we have just scratched the surface. So we are in our third fund right now, but I think, given the power of the community and this network, and the kind of continuous talent and ideas that come out of this, I hope that this becomes larger and larger. So that's a brief introduction to Ivy Cap, and let me pause here and hand it over to Subhadeep.
Subhadeep, please.
Sure. Thank you so much again for having me here. Um, and just to give everyone a quick introduction on Omnivore and myself. So you know, we are a sector focused fund, so quite different from Ivy Cap and IN in the sense that we're not that broad based. We only understand agriculture, right? And that's been our single focused lens over the last decade that we've been around. We're focused on India as a geography and largely are active in the seed to Series A kind of stage, so fairly early stage investor. Currently, we manage about 1,000 crores across two funds and a portfolio of 30 odd companies, and have been kind of the early folks as far as agri-tech investing is concerned in the country. Um, yeah, that is kind of in a nutshell of what we do. I think we will speak about today's, how we discovered SDGs rather and how we discovered impact later on. But as of now, very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Subhadeep. And I think I'll probably start with you itself, when we spoke last week, or probably last to last week, one of the things that stuck me and that stayed with me was how the fund has actually evolved. From what I remember, when you started Omnivore, it was not to be a fund that considered sustainability per se or SDGs per se, but you eventually moved there. So I want to actually hear it directly from you, the whole story of how you evolved, and maybe then going forward, how you're measuring your returns and impacts using SDGs.
Sure. I'll give it a shot. So since I've been with Omnivore pretty much since we started, I do have context here. So as you correctly mentioned, when we started out, our single focus was how do we look at improving farm level profitability or farmer level profitability through, of course, technology investments, right? So that was the single most important focus area for Omnivore. And we were a team of 2-3 people at that point in time, trying to figure out and trying to convince of what were startups back in 2011-12 in the agri sector, which is very nascent, that hey, listen, we're a VC fund and this is how VC works, and so on and so forth. I think as we started investing from 2012 actively, and our portfolio grew, we did about a dozen investments or close to 8 or 9 investments. I think that is when in 2013 or 14 is when we realized that there is a lot of work which our portfolio companies were doing, which we were not measuring. Um, Impact suddenly kind of was a buzzword, as in when we traveled out for conferences and we learned about what does impact really mean, because otherwise we were a finance first fund, we still are a finance first fund. In 2014 is when we first time proactively on our own started measuring portfolio level impact, and we worked very closely with institutes like IRMA, based out of Anand, and professors and students there to help us come up with a methodology to kind of understand how impact works. And once we started doing that on our own, we started to understand that our portfolio companies, products and services were actually reaching out to a few 100,000 farmers. The kind of network effect it had on their incomes or on their cost savings as part of their business, and they were phenomenal numbers. um, and since then we kind of did a annual report every year of our own accord, just trying to kind of put the work out there that apart from the kind of financial growth of companies, this is also happening, right? Maybe given the fact that we were a sectoral fund, we are a sectoral fund, and we operate um, only in the smallholder farming economies, right? So we're largely active in India, and some of our companies have now matured and moved into economies which are similar to India as far as the smallholder farmer economy is concerned. So you'll find a lot of our companies working in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asian countries as well. So we understand the smallholder farming system, and hence we realize that there's a lot of impact also which is being created just by the virtue of these for-profit enterprises scaling. So I guess that really helped us understand impact better and led us to, when we were raising our second fund, which was in 2017-18, that is where it really helped us to try and, it became a fundamental part of our thesis. It became a strong filter for us to do investments, to look at investments, and it reflected in a lot of DFIs, a lot of development finance institutions to become LPs in Omnivore. Right today, we have close to 7 DFIs as part of our second fund, which was totally not the case when Fund One. Fund One was an all domestic fund, and these are all European DFIs now in our second fund. So, and I think with that experience, we've also matured as a unit in terms of having a much more concrete impact policy, using that lens further in our investments. And I think in 2018 onwards, 2019 to be precise, that's when we kind of started linking our impact metrics to kind of SDGs, right? Because then we were able to see that, okay, if our goal as Omnivore is to look at investments which are either increasing smallholder profitability, they're either enhancing smallholder resilience, so basically providing access to finance or risk reduction for farmers, things like that, or they're improving agricultural sustainability, right? These were our three buckets for impact. And within each of these, as we mapped them out, I think what we realized that specifically SDGs, 1, 2, 8, 12, and 13 were very strong. So no poverty, zero hunger, working environments, responsible consumption, and climate. These emerged as pretty strong SDGs, which we started mapping against each of our, the three buckets that I previously mentioned. And it is today, part of our impact policy, which is out there as well. And every impact reporting that we do, the next one is due in June, um, has this lens now. So I'll kind of take a pause there, Smita, and that's kind of been the evolution of how we as a fund stumbled upon impact, and then how impact led us to SDGs, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Subhadeep, for sharing that. And I could go on and get into the depth of it. And in fact, I'll come back and want to know more about your measurement ways how you measure and your challenges and how you are taking it forward. But before that, since you started with something which also captured my attention, which was about finance first or impact first, I want to come to you, Ashish, here and have a clarity on IVCAP's stand with respect to this, in a sense that if I were to create a spectrum on x-axis and say, starting from social impact and going all the way to financial returns, and meaning, say, from a strategic philanthropy perspective at one end, and then moving to socially responsible or you can say commercial investing funds at the other end. And somewhere in between, I would keep the impact investing, where we would say, kind of it's neither focused, it's focused on both financial returns and impact simultaneously. Nothing is first. In philanthropy, of course, the impact is first. So where do you see IVCAP on this spectrum?
So, no, thanks, Smita, for that question. So basically, we are not an impact fund. We are basically building commercial enterprises, technology-backed enterprises, and we are getting our returns by doing that. However, once you look at the ecosystem in the way it is evolving, and by ecosystem I mean our LP pool, uh, the kind of entrepreneurial opportunities that are coming up in certain sectors. Subhadeep mentioned agriculture, but there are obviously more. If you look at uh, the client or the customer of some of these companies emphasizing on some of the on some of these objectives, sustainability objectives, and if you look at uh, later stage investors and acquirers of companies and how they are looking at governance, for instance, and uh, any of the paying a premium for goals. I think our view is that we will remain a commercial focused and return focused fund, but we will find a way of marrying these objectives with SDG goals because the ecosystem is building that way. There will be more investors, more LPs for SDG funds. There will be more, cutting edge technology and new enterprises and new sectors because of SDG. Uh, there will be late stage buyers and investors who will be willing to pay a premium for that. And therefore, I think the conflict, as you seem to point on that linear axis, is probably, from our perspective, our objective is now to remove the conflict and identify areas where uh, good financial returns can be obtained by doing good things too. So that's where we stand on, and as a reflection of that, SDG is a layer that we have added to our Fund 3. By the way, we found that quite a few of our portfolio companies were not adopting these goals, but doing activities around these goals without necessarily calling it a goal, right? And that could be sort of employment for the differently abled, women, even agriculture and poverty removal. So we saw a lot of that, and therefore we are quite confident that we can bridge this seeming conflict or dissonance between what is financial returns and what is responsible investing.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Ashish. Quickly on that, so you've already told me why you're beginning to look at SDGs too now. But and you're already mentioned in at the start your investment thesis, and clearly you're looking at fast growing companies, and you will continue to look at the same maybe continue to look at the same kind of startups that you were earlier looking for. But what does this change anything from the founder's perspective to approach you? Like, does this make any difference for them to approach you, or this means nothing for them?
No, I'm sure there is a process there. I think there is an education process there. Not Founders are very focused on building their businesses. Uh, there may be a perception that this is a distraction. We have got to be smart and try to figure out what works for that particular enterprise without overburdening him with goals that are not relevant for him, but identifying things that would be relevant for his business. For instance, these days there are lots of millennial customers who are looking for animal-free products. There are lots of customers who are looking at plant-based meat, for instance, right? Different kind, even dairy. I think there's substitutes for dairy, right? So there, I think our job is to kind of educate them and help them see this from a lens of what benefits their businesses, and at the same, therefore, adopting those kind of goals. And by the way, I think if the ecosystem grows well and as it's supposed to, I think such companies will have access to a lot of more capital, hopefully down the line, and also potentially, people should be willing to pay a premium at exit if the momentum of SDG investing continues to grow. So that's our job, to work with founders and help them to see where it benefits them, rather than set up a big compliance list and say, hey, you need to hire 5 more people to do this. That's not how we look at it. So we want to marry, again, going back to that thing, we want to marry the business objectives of the founder, the return objectives of the fund, with what makes sense from an SDG perspective.
Thanks, Ashish. I think you pointed it out very well that clearly there is a buzz in the market. There are customers looking for such products which probably a more sustainable business could offer. There are funds which are opening up just for those who are doing maybe more good work. While the returns are certainly the top priority, but do it in a way which is planet positive way maybe. So yes, and I'll come back to you more on the overheads part and the overburdening part, and we'll talk more about it. But moving forward to Padmaja. Padmaja, you heard about Subhadeep, who is more sectoral and clearly a more sustainability-oriented fund. We heard from Ashish, who is, of course, focused on returns, much like Subhadeep's fund, focused on return. But IVCAP is clearly saying that that's important to us. But now we are looking at a way to somehow marry the sustainable development goals and bring it together and make things happen in a better way. How does this sustainability thing work out for you as at work, and do you personally see value in this?
Thanks, Smita. I think there are two pieces I wanted to bring to play. When we remember, IAN was established in 2006. I think by very early in our system, there was this interest to invest in impactful companies, right? But in those early days, what we were struggling with first was to say, oh, these are likely to be non-profits. Okay, and that doesn't work for equity investors or any returnable capital investor, right? It quickly moved to say, okay, we can invest in these impactful investments, which will create, and they were called social ventures, to be honest. But we are okay if they give slightly lower returns. Okay. And we did start investing in some of those early companies as angels. However, what did happen is the investments that we made, fortunately, they started returning monies, right? Growing very rapidly and returning monies, which were not at all low returns. They were better than some of the non-impact investments provided us. So I think the cheese moved very rapidly to say, should we move into impact, lower returns? In fact, we had created a small SIG, a special interest group on social impact. And when we opened up the investments, we had more investors from uh, outside of the SIG who put up their hands. So I think it really sort of gave us clarity that companies which were giving financial returns or had the potential to give financial returns and creates impact does evince appetite amongst investors. The second, so that was our very early experience. The second piece I think that happened for us, if you ask me, is the fact that a number of our investments which we thought would not do well in this space actually started tracking well, right? They started getting customer engagement much faster because they were bringing that lens, which was a nice sales collateral, for want of a better word, right? To open doors. There was employee engagement at a different level. There was a motivation element that went into the companies. So I think that all those pieces help the companies to grow pretty rapidly. And companies like Unifor, where we invested as an angel, that's now moved to almost Series D. Uh, really told us that these companies, which we thought would not give us very good returns, financial returns, actually have started doing. They're no less than any other company. So I think number one is we were educated on how socially impactful companies grew and how could we help the entrepreneurs to actually create the business proposition side. I think that was a big piece in very early stage companies, that most of the entrepreneurs or founders were very cause based. They were thinking about cause, and our challenge was how do we infuse them with the business side, either that we spend time or we get somebody who works with them on the business side. But once they started doing that, right, I think the level of commitment to the company, to the business, was much higher. Actually, much quicker. They were much higher because they were driving a cause, and now they were driving a cause with a return, right? So it's a double motivation in some ways. So I think that was very interesting for us. And now to come to phase two of my learning, okay, what we started hearing on the angel platform when we were bringing deals, and we still hear this for as we speak. Great deal, great need, and hey, doing such good work. Okay, it's bringing impact. It's creating. It's giving returns, social returns. We must look at it. Let's go deep dive. Let's invest. And so it's become an additional factor to look at these companies. And honestly, Smita, after the pandemic, we are hearing more of that, right? So yes, do we invest in companies which are B2B SaaS plays? And I'm just using this just to differentiate between impact and non-impact. I don't, no disrespect, but do we want to do that? Yes, we do want to do that. But apple to apple, they're getting compared apple to apple, and not because they're an impact investment. And I think that's a huge recognition for companies which are based on cause or based on social impact or whatever, right? So they're not working with a handicap. Okay, so you are evaluating that, yes, this B2B company, which is probably not got, I personally feel there is a social impact in every startup, but I'll come to that later. But if you're looking at a socially impact company, it's actually being compared to maybe one of the vanilla kind, right? To say that let's look at the best team, let's look at the best proposition which can grow faster. And I think that's a big movement for this kind of companies. And remember, we investors started from a point by saying that these are not for profits, which was completely unreal, right? So there was a big education. Now, when we move to the fund, if you look at a number of our companies, right, they're actually on sustainability, clean tech, environment, all of those. Look at companies like Zip, electric vehicles, right? Look at Chakra, which is into cleaning up pollution, right? Look at Noka, which started with solar panel cleaning, and now they've gone into the medtech space with ventilators. So I think what has also happened is the consumer behavior has also changed, right? There's a much higher level of consciousness of of either buying or using good products. There's also consciousness in the policymakers. For Chakra, we started talking to National Green Tribunal, where we wanted to change the policy so that these devices, so we can have the pollution levels reduced. We thought we would only clean up for the Delhi state. We landed up by cleaning up for the entire nation, right? And that created a huge market for the company, which could just now go and sell and convert, right? So I think it happened because there was a consciousness already being built in the minds of the policymakers. This is a good thing. Why Delhi? Why not the entire country? Third piece, we are seeing that when we are helping companies recruit, I think a lot of potential employees are evaluating, is this something that I want to do because it's just because I need a package, right? Or is this something which gets me going? And we went one step further in a company called Nokar, which is into waterless robotic solar panel cleaner, which is very light. You can almost lift it with your hand and fix it and it works, right? We brought back somebody who had retired, okay? And he just came back to become the director and full-time employee, full-time management, because he was driven by the cause of helping the nation, both for the clean energy or the cleaning up the space, as well as for the ventilator and medtech industry, right? So I think that consciousness of employees, of potential employees, is also very important. Consumers, customers. And the last piece that I want to just share, what we have tried to do, and we've been able to do this more in the fund rather than the angel group, because remember, at the angel group, there is very little amount, but there are very small amounts of investment that goes in, right? And startups are really trying to do their MVPs, get their product, product market fit. They're just about getting 2 more guys on their team. So they don't have the resources. But at the fund level, we've put in a framework, okay, to say environmentally, socially, development goals, are you following it or not? So we do not want companies, as to echo what Ashish mentioned, we do not want companies to really create a huge team to do, fill these boxes. But what we are doing is telling them that please put in these systems, and we work with them to say you will ensure these things are there. First of all, just your gender and differently abled, you are following all the regulatory issues, and I don't mean tax issues or things. I think all the social policies you're following, but you're also looking for mechanics of better working, which is better for environment, which is better socially, which is equitable, which is better for livelihoods. How do you create, and even for your indirect ecosystem of employees, how do you bring value to them? So I think what we are trying to do is start putting in a kind of first ensuring that companies are well conscious and they're putting in these frameworks. The reason we feel that this is important, this is not just a tick mark for us. I think good governance, good value systems, just like children, have to be ingrained at very early stages of companies. Those are companies which will not only grow, and not only bring valuation, but they will be valuable to the economy, to the ecosystem. Number one reason. And I think we want to follow businesses, we want to invest, partner, work with businesses which are not only growing on the top line, but also the bottom line. And if we not governed well, if we are not socially conscious, then I believe that the bottom line will get impacted for various reasons, right? So I think these frameworks, when you put it in and you start inculcating that, I don't think we are going, coming down on them to say, okay, do these 30 things. You're saying start thinking about framework. These minor things you can do very easily, right? And how do you create these structures within your organization? Last point before I stop, it's not only at a level of saying that do you have the right policies, are you following the right things, it's also the culture of the organization, which is very important. Because when you are socially conscious, I think it's not socially conscious whether you're creating socially conscious products, you're working well with customers. I think it's the culture inside. Because if that happens, then I think you're a socially conscious organization for all stakeholders. And when you put that together, I think be it investors, be it funds, and be it LPs of the funds, I think all come together to actually build a better place, a better ecosystem. सारी कायनात इकट्ठी होती है to bring that value. Thank you.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much for your words. I think it just fills my heart with gratitude that you actually believe in these, and it's like I would clip this recording of what you just spoke and play it to every investor I meet in future. That listen, this is how we have to actually think as an investor. Beautiful, beautiful put, ma'am. Thank you so much. So, and this is the beauty of SDGs, to be very honest, that how can one create potential impact, positive impact on society in business as usual? Do not look outside, do not start thinking in terms of philanthropy or CSR, but look at your business as usual. You will have bigger customer base, you will be building reputation, and thank you, ma'am, for sharing so many beautiful stories there, Padmaja. And it's coming to you, Subhadeep. Like Padmaja just said, that the Indian Angel Network actually started with cause, which actually, if you look at the root of how the whole culture of business started with humankind, cause is what started it. Now, eventually, of course, today in all our MBA colleges, we teach them that profit is important. And so everybody's running after the profits, but somewhere all of this new modern understanding of business is truly, it's failing us. So the modern sense of model of development is clearly failing us. But so if in case we do not want this to happen, all this SDGs and good work that we are doing and all the effort that we are putting in, if we don't want it to be reduced as just a feel-good factor, we will have to be able to quantify it, show it in terms of tangible benefits and returns. And since you are one of the investors who are already practicing this, do you want to share if there are any certifications you go for, if there are any formats, reporting structure, if there is any methodology recognized that you actually follow or you recommend? Also, what were your initial challenges, and what do your challenges continue to be in following these?
Sure. So I'll try and address that in two buckets, Smita. One is, of course, there are a bunch of global standards, whether it's the IRIS, whether it's the GIN, to follow as far as impact measurement is concerned. It's very well defined. It's out there. It takes some learning too, but effectively that's available. And I agree with what Padmaja was saying. I think it's important for all of us as fund managers and in some ways catalysts to appreciate and understand that this is not a checklist. And also when we are working with our companies, and especially for early stage investors, it's important for us to potentially tell them that, hey, listen, this is not just an investor requirement. This is not just something that you do out of the fancy, but do it if you see value, right? Do it if you see that you want to build a responsible organization. So that's kind of point number one. And I think both these frameworks, Iris and Jim, give you enough flexibility, to improve over time, right? And these are certifications which you can improve upon over time. I think the other piece which she also alluded to, and I'd like to touch upon, is this entire ESG domain, right? Environmental, social governance standards, which I think many, not just LPs but even larger, there are now dedicated funds which play in public markets, which are ESG mandated funds. So the point that it's not recognized anymore, or it does not have value, like pure financial value, also is not true. Entrepreneurs can see it for themselves that they are creating a much more robust organization which will create value. And even in terms of like just generally getting a better valuation, getting a better um, kind of social capital in terms of your team and the legacy that you create with each of these companies, is there if you do have an eye out for these. And again, like, nobody is telling you that you need to force fit your business to these frameworks, right? Figure out what is applicable to you, right? Maybe in this year only two things are applicable, so you start measuring those, monitoring those. Maybe as you pivot, as you expand, you certainly think that, okay, now maybe I need to look at employee safety in a different way. Maybe I need to be more stringent when I'm looking at employee safety and welfare, right? So it's a journey. I don't think this is an exam which one of we pass and then we are there. I think it's a continuously improvement wala journey which all of us need to go through. And that's what's been our learning as far as ESG as well as impact has been concerned, right? So we continue to learn every single day, including now. Challenges, let's not brush them away. Challenges do exist. I think one fundamental challenge is always, there are entrepreneurs who sometimes don't see value in this, and then it becomes a question or a call which I think we have to take, that are we comfortable working with an entrepreneur who possibly is very rigid to even learning about these, right? That's not to say that they can't build a fantastic business. So, but it's at least for us to understand whether we are the right set of partners, or we're the right capital then to partner with a person who has maybe not just the foresight but not the intent also. See, there needs to be at least intentionality on their behalf to learn about these aspects, and then see if you can scale and graduate with these metrics. But if the intentionality is missing, then I think it's important for fund managers who have and who talk sustainability, who talk impact, who talk ESG, to at least walk the talk, right? So I guess that's the limited point which we can take away, and we try our best every day to maintain that balance, and that kind of analytical rigor, that hey, this might be an entrepreneur who's building something amazing, but it seems to be that they're not at all focused, or don't even recognize these elements at all, right? And they'll do things at the cost of these elements. So in that case, we kind of walk away. But um, I think the journey is that how do we get more and more people to kind of bring, or at least appreciate these. And I think now globally there is enough and more discussion as well as money available in the space, right? If you look at just impact investing and how that number has been increasing in India and other countries, I think it's proof enough that the larger demand is there, right, for such enterprises to get built and get funded also as they grow.
Thanks, Subhadeep. And I think most of this work is very voluntary in nature still. It's onto the start up the business and the investor to actually go for it, and not really there is no mandate per se or some level that, like you said, no exams that one has to clear on it.
So I think the government does not mandate a lot of these things. Some of it is mandated by LPs, but the degree of, let's say, complexity, or the degree of let's say, difficulty that you want to go, because some of these standards are like very, very detailed, and a company which is in its first year might just see those and freak out, right? Honestly, so will a fund. That it's just too much to do, right? I have a business to run. So as I said, I think as long as everyone has the intention and the directionality, I think everyone's okay. So some of these things are of course mandated by LPs and investors, but the degree to which a company can really grow in this is absolutely voluntary.
Great, Subhadeep. Thank you so much for that insight. I think, Ashish, I'll come to you for one last question before we do the concluding and then head towards questions. We are getting some questions from the attendees also. Is that, like Subhadeep said, that it's more voluntary in nature? I mean, at least from the startups perspective. And because I have some insight into your work, I also know that you have started to socialize the idea of SDGs and started to think in that direction. So what are the kind of reactions and feedbacks you've got so far? Do people think about the overheads, and do they freak out? Do they feel that they have so much to do? And also, how are you being able to convince such people, or even being able to prove that this is a better investment approach than just going after returns? And one last thing which I wanted to ask you, maybe I'll just add it to here in case you would like to touch upon that, is, do you ask for any data at the start, at the evaluation stage? Do you really ask for any information, or do you offer handholding thereafter on this space of sustainability?
So I think again, just to sort of comment on one of the things you said, we are not positioning it as a return versus SDG. In our minds, it's very clear. It's not either or. Uh, Returns is something that we are basically paid to do, and we have to give investor returns. Uh, our objective is really to find the match between the kind of investments we are doing and align businesses, entrepreneurs to some of the goals that make sense for their business. Whether it's from a customer point of view, or supply chain point of view, or operations point of view, recruitment point of view, whatever. Right. So that's one thing I would comment on. What was the first question? What are the reactions you're getting, right?
When you have started
Yeah.
to social.
What are the reactions? So I think if you look at it, we are still in early stages. I think there's a fair amount of interest from the investor community on SDG goals. I think it's uh, the entrepreneurs still have to understand how it benefits them, and their entrepreneurs are very focused people on in terms of what they are trying to build. So it's not that they will adopt it that easily unless they see the merits of it, right? Uh, so we are getting a pretty good response from the LP base. We are, to be honest, yet to test out, uh, entrepreneurs on this, but I believe there will be a range of responses. But one of the things we must remember is that change is always nonlinear. You know, it's not. This is not going to go like one step at a time. And we can see the curve, which is steeply upward sloping. So the level of adoption of these things, whether it is investors, whether it is consumers, whether it is entrepreneurs, will increase disproportionately. And like in all these things, once you reach an inflection point, your life becomes far easier. And I think uh, we are quite happy with what we are seeing, at least on the investor side, and even consumer side. There are many industries that we see which is going to change because of this, right? Uh, and there are lots of new opportunities being created because of SDGs. So We are excited about that. I think operationalizing it along with founders is the work that needs to be done, and we are like Subhadeep said, I think once you establish intent, and we are all long-term investors here, so it's not like next quarter I want these things from you, right? It will not work like that. I mean, it's going to be, you really got to see when to push what goal at what stage of company, right? So I think if the intent is there, then over a period of time, some of these goals can, companies can make a dramatic impact on some of these goals.
Yeah, thank you, Ashish. I think that makes a lot more sense to me. I think we are running out of time, so I'm going to ask you quickly. There is one question that we have got from the attendees, so I'm going to just, in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly go ahead there. I was planning to have a conclusion done, but maybe later. I'm going to read out the question, and it's open. It's not addressed to any specific panelists here, so anybody who feels comfortable can respond. And the question is from Abhimanyu Rathi from SLII Surat. So hi Abhimanyu, I think I recognize you. SDGs were defined in 2015. In the next 6 years, world has changed. Issues associated with the ongoing pandemic and climate change, which may not always directly align with SDGs per se, have become the need of the hour. So is the methodology of looking at investments from an impact point of view also evolving with time? If yes, do the projects that have long-term return potential,
I'll just complete it. And not an immediate short-term one. Do they fit your respective investment thesis?
So maybe Subhadeep, you would be a better person to respond to it,
I'm
right?
sure I'll give it a shot. I think it's a very good question. See, there are two elements to this. One is, unfortunately for most fund managers, there is an element called fund life. Like, let's say, a mutual fund, most of the VC funds in India have a tenure of 8 years or 10 years, or now increasingly trying to get to 12 years, which basically means it defines the typical investment holding capacity that we as funds have in any investment. So to answer your question, do we really, as omnivore, let's say, we get a lot of very deep research or biotech related deals, right? In agri, something which requires 2-3 years of fundamental research upfront, and then monetization can come in. So we are not averse to those investments as long as it comes very early in our fund life. Because if I'm in my 5th or 6th year of my fund, then I potentially know that I can't make that difference. My exit horizon will start. So as long as the respective fund is in its early days, I think people are generally very flexible towards even slightly longer term um, or longer gestation projects, if you may. That would be my limited submission.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Subhadeep. And I think we will probably just quickly hear from you a one-liner conclusion or any thoughts you have for any founder, hearing from you, who's right now at this panel, who's listening. If you have any one-line conclusion on one is if you are any focusing on any particular SDGs, or you are SDG agnostic, or you're otherwise not looking at one particular space, and there is how can they really reach you and get a probably look at them.
Sorry, for me?
Yes, please, all three of you, if you could
Okay,
just...
sure. So I think for us, as I defined those three elements, our investment thesis, it's all there on our website. Our impact policy is all there on our website. Anyone can go and take a look at omnivore.vc. We have detailed it out in terms of which SDGs and what frameworks we use. In terms of getting in touch with us, we're very accessible. My emails, my first name at omnivore.vc. You can reach out to us on info@omnivore.vc, or ping any of us on LinkedIn or what have you. So happy to chat.
Padmaja, any specific focus on any specific area in terms of sustainability or...
I think I would like to just make 2 points. One is to your earlier question. Um, I think what has happened, the world is changing even on the fund or the investor side. While early stage funds and even angels who are investing in long gestation companies like biotech, agri-tech, uh, clean tech also, which takes longer term. I think what is also happening is there is a huge interest from family offices and next stage funds which are coming in. So what does happen for the company that yes, it raises some early money from seed or early stage VCs, but the baton does pass on. So we've invested in a number of companies like that. For instance, Pandorum, which is a biotech company, which is a really, really long gestation. I don't think they will build a revenue, to be honest, right? It's an IP play. But already after us, they've raised 2 rounds. Okay. So I think there is money coming in into the country, both domestic and foreign. And there are unlocking of a lot of such pools of capital. So for entrepreneurs, this is a good thing to pick up some early money and then build something and go to the next level. So I think we look at that very, very actively. For all our companies, we do invest, and as soon as we invest, we start working with them, because the next round money is very important, not only to sustain the company but for them to grow rapidly, and be they social or any other. Okay, so we look at them completely like that. I think the larger piece that I did want to mention, which I think you asked, entrepreneurship, doing a startup, is actually a social development goal. Okay, so I think that's very, very important, because it's not only job creation, it's bringing ease to human lives. And the pandemic has shown us this so clearly. It was the startups which were center stage, which actually very ably, I think, got us through the toughest lockdown in the world. And I do believe that for entrepreneurs who are wanting to build valuable organizations, I think social consciousness is very important. And when we start talking to them, believe me, the entrepreneurs who've thought about this, who built this in their DNA and their genetics, it comes through in the conversation. We don't really need to ask them as diligence questions. It just comes through how they operate, what kind of thinking. And that also gives us the confidence, again, without us asking them, that this will be a well governed and a compliant business. So I think SDG goes beyond social development goals. I think it goes into, how should I say, creating high quality, valuable companies and not just valuation based companies.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Padmaja. I'm telling you again that I'm going to record everything you're saying and play it to every investor. It's so beautifully said. Thank you again. Yes, Ashish, please.
No, I mean, I think my message is very simple to entrepreneurs. Keep doing what you're doing. Pursue your passion, pursue your idea, uh, but keep in look at another lens, which is basically the world around you is also changing, right? And that will help you create a company which is much more solid, much more impactful, uh, without compromising on your core idea or product, right? Uh, and uh, that will make the world a better place. That's all. I mean, I think that additional layer that they need to think about, uh, it will really that will itself drive innovation, uh, for from a process point of view, from a operations point of view, and even from a choice of product market point of view. So just look out for that. I mean, and a lot of I expect a lot of change to happen in this area in the next sort of 10 years. And most of us in this room are, fund lives are 10 years. So 10 years is the right horizon, 10 to 12 years. And that change is definitely there, and entrepreneurs should capitalize on it.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Thanks, Subhadeep and Padmaja. And thank you all, the listeners. I think the whole idea of this discussion probably is, I mean, I could go on and have more discussions done, and there's so much to be done, to be talked about. Maybe in next series, I'll request Anju to have probably organize more such discussions. The core idea is continue your passion, focus on what you're doing, keep building whatever your area of work is. Sustainability is not an obstacle or a hindrance or a distraction to it. It is just to amplify how you can all your good work and probably offset if you are probably unknowingly, unintentionally doing any harm, how to offset that. So over to you, Anju, with that thought. Thank you everyone so much.
Thank you.
Just wanted to thank all the panelists and Smita for moderating such a great discussion. It's obvious there's a lot to talk about, lots of viewpoints. So we will be having more sessions on this. If any of the attendees have any questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to email them to us and we will share them with the panelists. But stay tuned for more series on this very interesting topic. Thank you all, everybody, and have a great evening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Ashish
you
and
very
Smita
much.
and Anju.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.